A right hand came out of nowhere and nearly took a man's head off. His legs buckled. His mouthguard flew into the third row. 20,000 people shot to their feet, and the sound that came out of that arena was something between a roar and a scream. The fighter who threw that punch didn't even look down. He just stood there, hands low, eyes locked on the crumpled body at his feet, like he'd been waiting for this moment for weeks. And he had, because the man on the canvas had spent the last month telling every camera and microphone in America that Mike Tyson was too small, too short, too easy to hit. He said it on television. He said it at the weigh-in. He said it to Tyson's face. What happened inside that ring silenced every single one of those words. Stay with me on this one. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand what Mike Tyson was in 1987. He was 21 years old. He was the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history, and he was doing things to grown men that made people uncomfortable to watch. Tyson wasn't like the heavyweights who came before him. He wasn't tall. He wasn't long. He stood 5'10" on a good day, and in a division full of men who were 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", that made him look like he'd wandered into the wrong weight class. His reach was short. His frame was compact. On paper, he had no business being in the heavyweight division at all. But here's the thing. None of that mattered once the bell rang. Tyson had something the measuring tape couldn't capture. He threw punches from angles nobody had seen before. He slipped jabs like they were thrown in slow motion. And when he hit you, the whole trajectory of your life changed. Fighters who had never been knocked down men with granite chins and 50 professional fights were waking up on the canvas wondering what year it was. He'd already destroyed Trevor Berbick for the title. He'd gone through every contender the division could throw at him, and he was getting faster, stronger, meaner. The boxing world hadn't seen anything like it. People tuned in not to see if Tyson would win, but to see how quickly the other man would fall. Now, into this steps Tyrell Biggs. Biggs was not some nobody. Believe me, this man had credentials. He'd won a gold medal at the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles in the super heavyweight division. He was tall, 6'4". He had long arms, quick hands, and a jab that could keep bigger men at distance all night. He was skilled. He was experienced. And on paper, he was exactly the kind of fighter who should give Tyson problems. The height advantage, the reach, the ability to box from the outside and never let Tyson get close enough to land those devastating hooks. That was the theory, anyway. But Biggs didn't just believe he could beat Tyson. He wanted everyone to know it. And that's where this story really starts to turn. In the weeks before the fight, Biggs went on a press tour that nobody asked for. He showed up on every sports broadcast, every radio show, every newspaper interview he could find. And the message was always the same. Mike Tyson is too small. He repeated it like a man trying to convince himself. He told reporters that Tyson's height was a joke, that his reach was a liability, that any competent boxer with a decent jab could keep him at the end of a long arm all night and pick him apart. He said Tyson was overrated. He said the knockouts were against bums who didn't know how to move. He said a real boxer, an Olympic gold medalist, would expose Tyson for what he really was, a short, overhyped slugger with no technique. And then he made it personal. At the weigh-in, cameras rolling, Biggs looked Tyson up and down and said something that every person in that room heard. He commented on Tyson's height. He smirked. He made a gesture with his hand, holding it flat above Tyson's head like he was measuring a child. The room went quiet for a second. Not because it was clever, because everyone in that room knew something Biggs apparently didn't. You don't mock Mike Tyson. Not to his face. Not ever. Tyson didn't respond. He didn't say a word. He just looked at Biggs with an expression that people who were there still talk about. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something colder than anger. It was patience. The kind of patience a man has when he knows exactly what he's going to do and he's already decided how much it's going to hurt. Cus D'Amato, Tyson's legendary trainer, had taught him something years earlier that stuck. Let them talk. Let them say whatever they want. Write it down if you have to. Remember every word. And when the bell rings, make them answer for all of it. Tyson wrote it down. Not on paper. Somewhere deeper than that. The fight was scheduled for October 16th, 1987. Atlantic City Convention Hall. 20,000 seats. Every single one of them sold. The whole boxing world was watching, and Biggs had made sure of that. He'd talked his way into the biggest stage of his life. He just didn't understand what was waiting for him on it. Fight night in Atlantic City had a feeling to it. You could sense it the moment you walked into that building. 20,000 people packed into Convention Hall, and the noise was already loud before either fighter had left the locker room. This wasn't just another heavyweight title defense. Everybody knew that. Biggs had made sure this was personal. He'd turned a boxing match into a grudge fight, and the crowd had showed up to see how that grudge would be settled. Tyson came out first. Black trunks. No robe. No socks. No music. Just him and that walk. If you've never seen Tyson's ring walk from this era, it's hard to describe what it did to a room. He moved through the crowd like a man heading to work. No theatrics. No wasted motion. Just a compact, muscular figure cutting through the noise, with his eyes already locked on the ring. The crowd noise shifted when he appeared. It got louder, but the pitch changed. There was excitement in it, sure, but there was something else too. Anticipation. The kind you feel before something irreversible happens. Biggs came out next. He looked confident. Taller than Tyson by a full 6 inches, lean, bouncing on his toes. He shadowboxed on his way to the ring, throwing sharp jabs at the air, showing off that reach that he'd been bragging about for weeks. His corner looked loose. His team looked relaxed. To anyone watching who didn't know the backstory, Biggs looked like a man who believed in himself completely. The referee brought them to the center of the ring. Final instructions. Tyson stared straight at Biggs the entire time. Biggs looked away first. It was quick, just a flicker, but people noticed. The bell rang. And for the first round, Biggs did exactly what he said he was going to do. He boxed. He used his jab. He moved laterally, kept distance, and peppered Tyson with long, straight punches from the outside. His footwork was clean. His timing was sharp. He was using every inch of that reach advantage, and for 3 minutes, the strategy was working. Tyson was pressing forward, but Biggs was making him miss. The jab kept landing. Light shots. Nothing with real power behind them, but they were scoring. Biggs went back to his corner after the first round, and you could see it on his face. He thought this was going to work. Round 2 started the same way. Biggs jabbing, moving, keeping Tyson at the end of that long arm. But now, something shifted. Tyson started cutting off the ring. Not chasing, cutting. There's a difference. Chasing is following a man wherever he goes. Cutting is taking away his exits, step by step, until he has nowhere left to move. Tyson had been doing this since he was 13 years old. Custamato had drilled it into him thousands of times, and now Biggs was learning what it felt like to be on the other end of it. Halfway through the second round, Tyson got inside. He slipped a jab, ducked under Biggs's right hand, and drove a left hook into Biggs's ribcage. The sound it made was different from the other punches, sharper, wetter. Biggs's whole body folded sideways for a half second before he grabbed on and held. The referee separated them. Biggs backed up. He was still moving, still jabbing, but something had changed in his posture. He was standing a little straighter now, protecting his body. That one shot to the ribs had rewritten the entire fight. Now here's the thing. Most fighters in Tyson's position, once they land a shot like that, go for the finish. They pour it on. They try to end it right there. That's instinct. That's what the crowd wants. That's what makes highlight reels. Tyson didn't do that. He backed off. He let Biggs recover. He went back to pressing forward, cutting the ring, throwing single shots. And when he got inside again in round 3, he went right back to the body. Same spot. Left side. Ribs. Biggs winced and clinched. Tyson did it again in round 4, and again in round 5. Every time he got inside, he targeted the same area. Not the head, not the jaw, the ribs. Over and over. It took the commentators a few rounds to realize what they were seeing. Tyson wasn't trying to knock Biggs out. He was trying to hurt him, slowly, deliberately, round by round. He was making Biggs pay for every word, every interview, every smirk, every hand held flat above his head at the weigh-in. Tyson was collecting on a debt, and he was collecting it with interest. By the end of round 5, Biggs looked like a different man than the one who'd walked into that ring. His movement was slower. His jab had lost its snap. He was breathing through his mouth. His legs, which had been so quick in the first round, were heavy now. Tyson's bodywork had taken something out of him that wasn't coming back. But then, between rounds, something happened. Biggs sat on his stool, and his corner went to work. His trainer was talking fast, hands moving, giving instructions. They wiped his face. They gave him water. And whatever they said, it worked. When the bell rang for round 6, Biggs came out different. He was moving again. His jab was back. He circled left, then right, popping that long, straight punch and keeping Tyson on the outside. For the first minute of the round, he looked like the Biggs from round 1. Smooth, technical, using his reach. A couple of those jabs landed clean, and the crowd responded. There was a murmur that ran through the arena. Something like hope. Like maybe Biggs had figured it out. Like maybe this was going to be a real fight after all. His corner was banging on the canvas, shouting encouragement. Biggs nodded between combinations. His footwork looked crisp. The commentators noted the adjustment. For a full 90 seconds, it looked like Tyrell Biggs had turned a corner. The audience settled back into their seats. The tension in the building dropped, just slightly, just enough. Then Tyson changed his stance. It was subtle. Most people in the arena didn't even notice. He shifted his feet, dropped his center of gravity an inch lower, and started moving forward with a rhythm that wasn't there before. Biggs threw a jab. Tyson slipped it. Biggs threw another. Tyson slipped that one too. And then Tyson was inside, and he didn't come alone. He brought a 3-punch combination that started with a left hook to the body, continued with a right hand to the side of the head, and finished with another left hook that caught Biggs flush on the jaw. Biggs hit the ropes. Not because he was trying to lean on them, because his legs sent him there. And Tyson didn't step back. He didn't reset. He didn't give Biggs a single inch of space to breathe. He unloaded. Left. Right. Left. Body. Head. Body again. The punches came in clusters, fast and heavy, and every one of them landed with the kind of force that you could hear in the upper deck. Biggs covered up, gloves pressed against his face, elbows tucked against his ribs, but it didn't matter. Tyson was punching through the guard. Shots were getting in between the gloves. Shots were curling around the elbows. Biggs's head was snapping back and forth like it wasn't connected to his neck properly. This was no longer a boxing match. Believe me, this was something else entirely. Up to this point, the story had been about pride. One man mocked another man's size, and that man was making him pay for it inside the ring. That's a clean narrative. That's personal. But what was happening now went beyond personal. Tyson wasn't just punishing Biggs. He was putting on a demonstration. Every heavyweight in the world was watching this fight. Every contender, every promoter, every trainer, with a tall fighter who thought reach and height could solve the Tyson problem. And what Tyson was showing them, round by round, shot by shot, was that none of it mattered. Your height doesn't matter. Your reach doesn't matter. Your Olympic gold medal doesn't matter. When I get inside, it's over. And I will always get inside. The fight had shifted from a grudge match into a public warning. This was no longer just about Terrell Biggs. This was about every man who would ever step into a ring with Mike Tyson. And every single one of them was watching. The broadcast team caught up to it around this time. The commentators started talking in quieter voices. You could hear the shift. They weren't calling a fight anymore. They were describing something that made them uncomfortable. One of them said that Tyson appeared to be prolonging the punishment intentionally. The other didn't disagree. In Biggs's corner, a conversation was happening that the cameras only partially caught. His trainer was leaning over the ropes between rounds, looking at Biggs's face, checking his eyes. The assistant trainer held a towel, not to wipe sweat, to throw. The question was right there, hanging in the air between them. Do we stop this? Biggs shook his head before anyone asked. He wanted to continue. He was a gold medalist. He was a professional. He was not going to quit on his stool. That decision cost him. If you've been with me this long, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I promise you, the end of this story is worth it. Round 6 bled into round 7, and Tyson's approach didn't change. He pressed forward, cut off the ring, got inside, and went to work. But now, there was something different in the way Biggs was taking the punches. In the early rounds, when a shot landed, Biggs would react. He'd grab, he'd move, he'd try to tie Tyson up. Now he was just absorbing them. His arms were still up, but there was no resistance behind them. He was standing in front of Tyson, like a man standing in a rainstorm, just waiting for it to end. Tyson sensed it. You could see the moment he realized Biggs had nothing left. His rhythm picked up. His combinations got tighter. He started sitting down on his punches, loading up the right hand, throwing it with full rotation. Every one of those shots carried a message. This is what happens. This is what you get. You talked. Now listen. Between rounds, Biggs's corner was shouting instructions that Biggs couldn't execute anymore. Move your feet. Jab. Circle. Keep him outside. The words were right. The strategy was sound. But Biggs's body was no longer accepting commands from his brain. His legs were dead. His arms were heavy. His ribs were on fire from 6 rounds of body shots that had been aimed at the same spot with surgical precision. He was running on nothing but stubbornness, and stubbornness doesn't block punches. The referee was watching closely now. He'd been letting the fight continue because Biggs was still standing, still throwing occasional punches, still technically in the fight. But the gap between technically in the fight and actually in the fight was getting wider every 30 seconds. The ref moved closer. He started positioning himself between the fighters after every exchange, looking into Biggs's eyes, checking for the one thing that would make him stop it. That vacant look. That glassy, faraway stare that means a fighter is no longer processing what's happening to him. Biggs kept blinking, kept focusing, kept telling the ref he was fine. He was not fine. Round 7 started, and Tyson came out like a man who had decided that the lesson was over. No more patient stalking. No more measured body work. No more single shots designed to accumulate damage. Tyson came out throwing with everything he had, and everything he had was more than any heavyweight on earth could absorb. The first exchange lasted 8 seconds. Tyson threw a jab to close the distance. Biggs tried to counter with a right hand, but it was slow, way too slow, and Tyson was already underneath it. A left hook crashed into Biggs's ribs, and his knees dipped. Before he could recover, a right uppercut came through the middle of his guard and snapped his head back. Biggs stumbled sideways, his feet tangled. He grabbed the ropes with his left hand to keep himself standing. The crowd was on its feet. 20,000 people screaming. But Tyson didn't rush. He reset, measured the distance, waited for Biggs to turn and face him. And when Biggs did turn, when he let go of the ropes and put his hands up one more time, Tyson let it go. A left hook, short, compact, thrown from the hip with Tyson's entire body behind it. It caught Biggs on the right side of his jaw, and the effect was immediate. Biggs's eyes went blank. Not confused, not dazed, blank, like someone had switched off the power. His legs folded, and he dropped straight down. Not backward, not sideways. Straight down, like a building being demolished from the foundation. His face hit the canvas, and he didn't move. The referee didn't count. He didn't need to. He took one look at Biggs lying face down on the canvas and waved his arms. It was over. The arena erupted. The noise that came out of that building was massive. People were standing on their chairs. Strangers were grabbing each other. The sound hit you in the chest. It was one of those moments that everyone in the room understood they were going to remember. Not because it was a great fight. It wasn't a great fight. It was a great destruction. And they had all just witnessed it, from beginning to end. Tyson stood in the center of the ring. His corner rushed in. People were hugging him, grabbing his arms, trying to lift him up. But Tyson wasn't celebrating. Not yet. He stood there looking down at where Biggs had fallen, and his face carried no joy, no relief, no excitement, just a cold, settled expression. Like a man who had finished a task he'd been planning for a long time and found that the completion of it was exactly as satisfying as he'd expected. Nothing more, nothing less. Biggs was helped to his feet by his corner. It took a while. His legs weren't cooperating, and his eyes were still trying to focus on something fixed. When he finally stood, he leaned on his trainer's shoulder and stared at the canvas, like he was trying to remember how he'd ended up on it. His face was swollen. His ribs were bruised in a pattern that would turn deep purple by morning. He had taken more punishment in 7 rounds than most fighters absorb in an entire career. Now here's the part that made this fight different from every other knockout Tyson had delivered. And he delivered a lot of them. After the fight, Tyson sat down for the post-fight interview. The interviewer asked him the standard questions. How did it feel? What was his strategy? Was he happy with his performance? Tyson answered them, but not in the way anyone expected. He didn't talk about his training. He didn't talk about his technique. He didn't talk about the game plan or the body work or the way he'd cut off the ring. He talked about the words. Tyson said he could have knocked Biggs out earlier. He said he had the power to end it in the first 3 rounds if he'd wanted to, but he didn't want to. He wanted Biggs to feel it. He wanted it to last. He said he wanted to hurt Biggs. Not beat him, hurt him. He wanted Biggs to remember every second of those 7 rounds for the rest of his life. He wanted the pain to be the answer to every insult, every taunt, every smirk, every public comment about his height and his reach and his size. The interviewer went quiet for a moment. The room got still. Because what Tyson was describing wasn't strategy. It was punishment. Calculated, premeditated punishment. He hadn't fought Biggs the way a champion defends his title. He'd fought Biggs the way a man settles a debt that's been eating at him for weeks, and he wasn't sorry about it. He wasn't dressing it up in sportsmanship or competitive language. He was telling the truth, plain and flat, and the truth was uncomfortable. They replayed the knockout on the arena screen. 20,000 people watched it again. The left hook, the collapse, the referee's wave. And in the replay you could see something that was hard to catch in real time. In the half-second before that final hook landed, Biggs's hands had dropped. Not because he'd given up, because his arms simply didn't have the strength to stay raised anymore. 7 rounds of body shots had drained every ounce of resistance from his muscles. Tyson had hollowed him out from the inside, and the knockout was just the last step in a process that had started in round 2. The broadcast team called it one of the most dominant heavyweight performances they had ever seen. They weren't wrong. The arena emptied slowly that night. People didn't rush for the exits the way they usually do after a fight. They lingered. They stood in the aisles talking to strangers. They replayed what they'd seen with their hands, throwing phantom punches, shaking their heads. Something had happened inside that building that needed processing, and 20,000 people were doing it at the same time. Tyrell Biggs went to the hospital that night. Not because of the knockout, because of the body shots. His ribs were damaged in a way that took weeks to heal. The bruising spread across his left side like a map of everywhere Tyson's fists had been, and every breath reminded him of round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. The punishment Tyson had delivered to his midsection was so thorough and so targeted that doctors told Biggs he was lucky nothing had been broken. Biggs didn't feel lucky. He gave interviews in the days that followed. He was honest about them, to his credit. He didn't make excuses. He didn't claim he'd been robbed or that the referee had stopped it too early. He said Tyson was the hardest puncher he'd ever faced. He said the body shots were unlike anything he'd experienced in the amateurs or the pros. He said he'd underestimated what Tyson could do on the inside, and he'd paid for it. But here's what Biggs didn't say, and what everybody watching already knew. The mockery had been a mistake. Not a competitive miscalculation. Not a promotional tactic that backfired. A mistake. The kind you can't take back and can't undo, because the consequences have already been delivered in front of 20,000 witnesses and a national television audience. Biggs continued fighting after the Tyson loss. He had to. Boxing was his livelihood. But something was different. The confidence that had defined his career, that gold medal swagger, that willingness to stand in front of any man in the division and tell him exactly why he was going to lose, that was gone. He fought cautiously after Tyson. He took fewer risks. He clinched more. He aged 10 years in 7 rounds, and every fighter he faced after that knew it. His record after the Tyson fight was uneven. Some wins, some losses. Nothing that put him back in contention for a title. He drifted through the lower ranks of the heavyweight division for a few more years before retiring without another shot at the championship. The Olympic gold medal stayed on his resume. But when people said the name Tyrell Biggs, they didn't think about the Olympics. They thought about round 7. They thought about the canvas. They thought about Mike Tyson standing over him with that cold, flat expression that said everything words couldn't. For Tyson, the Biggs fight became something else entirely. It became a warning, a public, permanent, recorded warning that every future opponent had to reckon with. You could study the tape. You could watch how Biggs tried to use his reach. You could see how the jab worked in the first round and how it stopped working by the 4th. You could see the body shots accumulating. You could see the moment in round 7 when Biggs's arms dropped and the fight was already over before the final punch landed. And if you were a heavyweight with a title shot coming against Mike Tyson, you could watch all of that and ask yourself one very simple question. Do I really want to get in the ring with this man? Most of them did, because that's what fighters do. But none of them mocked his size again. Not publicly, not on camera, not to his face. That particular form of disrespect was retired after the Biggs fight, because everybody had seen what happened when someone tried it. The tape was right there. 7 rounds of evidence. A gold medalist on the canvas. A champion standing over him with no remorse. The funny thing about size is that people misunderstand it. They think size is about inches, about how tall you stand, or how long your arms are, or how much space you take up in a room. And in most of life, they're right. The taller man looks more imposing. The longer reach looks like an advantage. The bigger frame looks harder to move. But in a boxing ring, size is about something else. Size is about what happens when you get hit. Size is about what you can deliver to another human being in a closed space with nowhere to run. And by that measure, Mike Tyson was the biggest man who ever lived. 20,000 people walked into that arena expecting a fight. What they got was an answer. A definitive, 7-round, physically devastating answer to a question that should never have been asked. Biggs asked it anyway. He asked it on television, at press conferences, at the weigh-in, to Tyson's face. And Tyson answered it the only way he knew how. Remember that mouth guard? The one that flew into the 3rd row in the opening seconds of this story. Someone in the crowd caught it, held onto it. It ended up in a private collection years later, sitting in a glass case next to a photograph of the punch that sent it flying. A small, curved piece of rubber and plastic. That's all it was. But it carried the full weight of what happened that night. A man talked. A man fought. And when it was over, the only thing left to say was nothing at all. The arena went quiet after the knockout. Not silent, exactly, but that deep, heavy kind of quiet that settles over a room when people have just seen something real. Something that reminds them what happens when words meet consequences. 20,000 people stood there, holding their breath, staring at the ring, and for a long moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, the noise came back. The cheering, the shouting, the sounds of a crowd remembering where they were. But that moment of quiet was the real ending. That was the part that stayed with people. Not the punches, not the knockout, the silence afterward. The silence that said everything Tyson never had to.